In March 2026, Huawei walked onto a stage in Shenzhen and raised a single chip card into the air. One card. 1,056 quadrillion calculations every single second. Nearly 3 times more powerful than the most advanced AI chip America is still legally allowed to sell to China. 3 years ago, Washington's best semiconductor analyst said China was a decade away from building anything close to this. That timeline did not slip. It collapsed entirely. But here is the part that should keep every executive in Silicon Valley awake at night. This chip was built without a single piece of American technology anywhere inside it. No American tools, no American memory, no American software, nothing. And 8 days before it went live, Nvidia's CEO called what was happening a disastrous outcome. He was not exaggerating. America built the most powerful semiconductor export control system in history. Blocked the tools, blocked the memory, blocked the chips themselves. The entire strategy rested on one assumption: that China could not build what it could not buy. That assumption just broke. In this video, you are going to understand exactly what the Atlas 350 is and what it can do. How Huawei built competitive AI hardware without a single piece of the global supply chain every expert said was mandatory. The software breakthrough that happened 8 days after the chip launched. And what it means that for the first time in the entire history of artificial intelligence, a complete computing stack from raw silicon to deployed software operates without a single American component anywhere inside it. If you want to understand what is actually happening in the world before it hits the headlines, hit the like button and subscribe right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people. Now, let us get into it. The chip it was built to beat. To understand why the Atlas 350 matters, you first need to understand the chip it was specifically engineered to destroy. When America tightened export restrictions on advanced semiconductors, Nvidia was forced to build a separate product exclusively for the Chinese market. They called it the H20. Intentionally restricted, intentionally throttled. The entire purpose was straightforward: give Chinese companies just enough computing power for basic operations, while making sure they could never train the kind of massive AI models that matter in a real competition. The H20 was a ceiling. Washington was confident that ceiling would hold. The Atlas 350 demolished it. One card, 1,056 petaflops of AI computing power, nearly 3 times the raw throughput of the H20. Think about what that actually means. America designed a restricted chip specifically to limit Chinese AI development. China built a chip that makes that restricted product look outdated. And the price landed at approximately $16. 000, exactly the budget range Chinese companies had already set aside for the American chip it just replaced. Within weeks, Alibaba, Tencent, and ByteDance were placing bulk orders. Huawei's AI chip revenue is now projected to reach $12 billion by end of 2026, up from $7.5 billion the year before. That is not incremental growth. That is a new market leader emerging in real time. Nvidia's market share inside China collapsed from roughly 95% to essentially zero. Jensen Huang confirmed that number himself. The market Nvidia lost was worth an estimated $50 billion. And by every available indication, it is not coming back. The hidden story, what should have been impossible, the Atlas 350, stops looking like a chip announcement the moment you understand what Huawei was not allowed to use to build it. Every advanced AI accelerator in existence today depends on an extraordinarily specialized global supply chain. Processors come from TSMC in Taiwan, manufactured using extreme ultraviolet lithography machines built exclusively by ASML in the Netherlands. ASML is the only company on Earth that makes these machines. Each one costs over $200 million, takes months to ship, requires teams of specialized engineers just to install. When America pressured the Dutch government to block UV exports to China, the assumption was that this single choke point would permanently freeze Chinese chip progress in place. High bandwidth memory comes almost entirely from SK Hynix and Samsung in South Korea. Sever any single link in that chain and conventional wisdom says you simply cannot build a competitive AI chip. China was cut off from every single one of those links simultaneously. Huawei's manufacturing partner SMIC uses older technology, no EUV capability, lower production yields. Silicon die is roughly 60% larger than what Nvidia produces for comparable performance. The entire Western semiconductor establishment arrived at the identical conclusion. There was no realistic path from where China stood to where it needed to be. And then Huawei built their own memory from the ground up. The Atlas 350 is the first AI accelerator in recorded history to carry entirely self-developed high-bandwidth memory. Huawei branded it HiBL 1.0, not licensed from SK Hynix, not adapted from Samsung. A fully proprietary standard engineered from scratch inside China. 112 gigabytes, 1004 terabytes per second, 4 times finer memory access than the previous generation. It is worth pausing here to really feel the weight of that. The processor Chinese, the memory Chinese, the interconnect fabric Chinese. For the first time ever, an entire hardware stack inside a Chinese AI chip is sourced entirely domestically. It is the semiconductor industry's equivalent of someone confiscating every machine shop, every alloy supplier, and every engineering blueprint you own, and you still somehow build a working jet engine. And then that engine takes flight. The software breakthrough nobody saw coming, but even all of that only covers the hardware side. What happened 8 days after the Atlas 350 launched is where this stops being a chip story entirely. Here is what most people fundamentally misunderstand about Nvidia's real dominance. It was never about the chips. It was always about CUDA. CUDA is Nvidia's proprietary software ecosystem, the critical layer connecting raw hardware to every meaningful AI model ever built. GPT, Claude, Gemini, Llama, every single one was written and optimized specifically to run on CUDA. Walking away from that ecosystem is not like swapping out a light bulb. It is like rewiring an entire building from the foundation up. That is exactly why most analysts assumed China would remain stuck years behind on software regardless of hardware progress. Then on April 24, 2026, DeepSeek released V4. 1.6 trillion parameters, 1 million token context window, and the first frontier-class AI model in history built with absolutely zero Nvidia dependency anywhere across its entire stack. Not trained on Nvidia chips. Not optimized for CUDA at any stage. DeepSeek's engineers spent months rewriting core computational kernels from scratch so the model could run natively on Ascend hardware using Huawei's own software framework. Alibaba Cloud and Tencent Cloud had it deployed within hours of release. Within days, dozens of Chinese startups began migrating their infrastructure off Nvidia-dependent systems and onto Ascend-based deployments. Open-source developers outside China took notice. DeepSeek V4's weights were released publicly. Within a month, research teams across Europe and Southeast Asia had downloaded and fine-tuned it. Teams that had never touched Chinese AI infrastructure before. For the first time, a serious slice of the global open-source AI community had a genuine high-performance alternative to Nvidia that did not require American hardware at any stage. China did not just build a chip. China built an ecosystem. How the world reacted, and what it means the reaction outside China, came fast. And it was not subtle. Within days of the Atlas 350 announcement, members of the U.S. House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party publicly called for an emergency review of existing export control policy. The current framework had clearly failed its stated goal. Semiconductor industry groups pushed back from the opposite direction, warning that even tighter restrictions would only accelerate the exact domestic substitution Washington was trying to prevent. In Seoul, executives at SK Hynix and Samsung held internal briefings on what a Chinese-made memory alternative meant for their dominance over high-bandwidth memory, a choke point that had been treated as unassailable. In Brussels, EU policymakers debated whether the Netherlands' EU export restrictions had simply handed China the motivation to build a parallel supply chain rather than slowing it down. Jensen Huang did not dispute the Atlas 350's numbers. He focused instead on Nvidia's continued lead at the absolute highest end of frontier research, a distinction that mattered less and less to the bulk of commercial buyers now choosing on cost and supply security. And that distinction captures the entire strategic shift in 3 words. Commercial buyers chose. Not the most powerful chip available anywhere. The most available chip that could not be sanctioned away tomorrow. That calculation cost plus supply security plus zero geopolitical exposure is now driving purchasing decisions across the largest technology companies inside the world's second largest economy. And no export control can fix that calculation because the domestic alternative already exists. What comes next, and the honest picture here, is the honest picture. SMIC's production yields on the Atlas 350 remain meaningfully lower than TSMC's. Huawei cannot yet manufacture at anywhere near the volume Nvidia produces globally. Supply constraints are real. There is also strong evidence that a significant gray market for smuggled and stockpiled Nvidia chips has continued operating inside China throughout this period. China's AI infrastructure today is still a genuine mix of domestic and foreign hardware. And for the most extreme frontier research, workloads Nvidia's top chips still hold a real measurable edge. None of that erases what Huawei built. It means the transition is a process still unfolding, not a finished story. But step back and survey what actually exists on the ground today. The chip is Chinese. The memory is Chinese. The software framework is Chinese. The frontier model running on top of all of it is Chinese. For the very first time in the entire history of artificial intelligence, a complete computing stack from raw silicon to deployed software operates without a single American component anywhere inside it. American AI runs on Nvidia. Chinese AI now runs on Huawei. 2 completely separate technology stacks. 2 distinct ecosystems. 2 futures developing in parallel on opposite sides of the Pacific. The original sanctions were designed to slow China's AI development by a decade. Cut off the tools. Cut off the memory, cut off the chips. What actually happened was the precise opposite. Every barrier specifically engineered to stop China became the exact catalyst that forced China to build its own independent infrastructure from the ground up. In less than 18 months, the world's single largest AI chip market went from near total dependence on Nvidia to near total independence from Nvidia. Not because any restriction was lifted, because China built around every single one of them. That is not the outcome anyone in Washington predicted. And the gap between the 2 AI civilizations is not widening the way most people assumed. It is shrinking. In real time. Right now. If this video gave you a genuinely new way of looking at the AI race, not the chip war everyone is watching, but the ecosystem war that decides who wins it, hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss what we cover next. Turn on notifications, because these stories move fast, and you do not want to be the last to know. Now here is the question I want you to think about and answer in the comments. America built the most sophisticated export control system in history to stop China from building this. China built it anyway in 18 months. Does that mean export controls are finished as a geopolitical tool? Or does America still have moves left? Drop your answer below. I read every single comment, and I genuinely want to know what you think.